You are embarrassing me in front of my real family." Those words cut into me like a blade. They came straight from the mouth of my daughter, Sophie, at her engagement party just last month. Sophie had recently inherited $41 million, and suddenly the father who raised her, me, a construction worker, was no longer fit to stand beside her new life. What she did not realize, though, was that I had been carrying a secret for more than 25 years, and that very fortune she had just claimed came with conditions she was about to shatter in the loudest, most humiliating way possible. I did not argue. I did not yell. I just smiled, tugged at the laces of my dusty work boots, and let her words hang in the air. I knew she was digging her own grave with every sentence she spoke. Sophie thought she understood everything about wealth and influence, but she was about to learn a brutal truth. There is a canyon-wide difference between money that falls into your lap and respect you fight tooth and nail to earn. If you are hearing my story now, I ask you to follow along, share where you are listening from, and subscribe, because what I am about to tell you stretches back 25 years. It begins with one choice I made that changed my life, my family, and eventually, the way $41 million could vanish in just 72 hours. My name is David Harper. For the past 5 years, my daughter has treated me like I am less than a man in my own family, like I am a second-class guest in her world. At first, it was little things, almost easy to brush off. 3 years ago, on her wedding day, she placed me at a table with the catering crew instead of my own kin. When I asked her why, she smiled politely and said, "Dad, you will feel more comfortable sitting with people who understand your situation." My situation, that is what she called it. I am a construction foreman. I drive a 2018 Ford F-150 pickup truck with over 200,000 miles on it. On my feet, I wear steel-toed Red Wing boots that cost me $350. Boots that have carried me through storms, heat, and long nights pouring concrete. Sophie never noticed those details. To her, I was just the man who walked into family gatherings with calloused hands and dirt under his fingernails. It only grew worse after she married Andrew Whitman last year. Andrew came from old Beverly Hills wealth. His family owns a chain of high-end hotels. At Christmas dinner, Sophie introduced me to his parents as if I were an embarrassment. She even apologized for the roughness of my hands when I passed the wine across the table. Her exact words burned into me. Dad has spent his whole life working with concrete. You can tell. Her mother, Claire, had passed 6 years earlier. I believed we had been left with nothing more than a modest insurance payout. But after Claire's death, I discovered something she had never told me. Her family had money. Old money. The kind tangled up in lawyers, trust funds, and rules that could strangle you if you broke them. When Sophie turned 28 last year, she inherited $41 million. $35 million locked in a trust fund, and $6 million in immediate cash. In a single day, my daughter leapt from middle class to multimillionaire. That was when she purchased a Beverly Hills penthouse for $3.1 million. That was when she began shopping in boutiques where one dress cost more than most working men's cars. That was when she decided her father, who spent his life building houses with his hands, no longer fit the picture of her perfect life. But the money was not free. There were requirements. She had to donate $500,000 every year to charity. She had to maintain what the trust papers described as respectful relationships with surviving family members. She had to file annual reports proving both requirements were met. Sophie looked at the dollar signs, but she ignored the fine print. Last month, she joined the Beverly Hills Country Club, writing a check for $50,000 just for the membership fee. She told me she needed to network with her kind of people. That was her phrase, not mine. It was at that club she met the Lawson family. Philip Lawson runs a private equity firm worth $900 million. His wife, Elaine, sits on 3 different charity boards. Their son, Jonathan, had just graduated from Harvard Business School. Sophie wanted to impress them more than anything. And apparently, a father who still wore work clothes was not part of her plan. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. She invited me to lunch at the club, and for a moment I hoped she wanted to fix things between us. Instead, she slid a business card across the table. "Dad, I need you to understand something, she said, avoiding my eyes. My life has changed. The people I am with now, they expect certain things. I picked up the card. Laura Hayes, image consultant to the Beverly Hills Elite. $500 per session. I asked her, "What are you asking me to do, Sophie?" She answered without shame. "I'm asking you to get help. Learn how to dress right. Maybe take a class on social etiquette. You could even tell people you are retired instead of saying you work construction." I handed the card back across the table. I told her plainly, "I am proud of what I do." Her response came fast, cold, and final. "Well, I am not." She looked me square in the face and said she had worked too hard for her new life to let it be weakened by someone who did not understand the rules. The rules. As though respect were a dress you could buy off a rack at Nordstrom. I should have walked away right then. But I made one last try. I leaned forward and said, "Sophie, I have been your father for 29 years. Does that not count for anything?" She glanced around the dining room to be sure nobody was listening, leaned closer, and whispered so low I could barely hear. "Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world." That talk with Sophie happened on the first day of September, just 13 days before her engagement party, the same party where everything in our lives shifted. I had to face a hard question. What would I stand to lose if I kept my mouth shut? First and most obvious was my relationship with the only child I had. Sophie and I had grown apart, sure, but she was still my daughter. I was the one who raised her after her mother, Claire, passed away. I taught that girl how to balance on a bicycle, sat with her at the kitchen table every night for 12 years while she did homework, and later walked her proudly down the aisle at her wedding. All those years, all those memories, were now dangling over the edge of a cliff, ready to be erased simply because I no longer fit her new, polished lifestyle. Then there was my reputation. News runs fast in Beverly Hills, faster than wildfire. If Sophie kept painting me as a shameful burden, it would not stop at the family dinner table. That kind of talk would spread into my work, my friendships, and my place in the community. People listen to that sort of gossip out there. But the thing I feared losing the most was my own self-respect. I had spent 25 years building a life that, while simple, filled me with pride. I was not about to let even my own flesh and blood tear that down without consequences. Here is the piece of the story Sophie never bothered to learn. The fortune she inherited came from Claire's grandmother, Catherine Bennett. Catherine was not just wealthy, she was legacy wealthy. Old Philadelphia money. Her family made their fortune in the 1800s and carried it carefully, tied up with traditions and values that never faded. Catherine had lived through the Great Depression, and she never forgot what it taught her, that money comes and goes, but character is what keeps a family standing. When Catherine put her will together back in 2010, she included rules that were sharper than any lawyer's pen. Section 7, Clause 2 stated in plain words that heirs must show loyalty and maintain respectful, supportive relationships with living family members to keep access to the fortune. Section 12, Clause 4 took it further. Any public humiliation, disrespect, or rejection of family would trigger an immediate review and possibly strip the heir of every dollar. Claire's family attorney, a sharp woman named Helen Brooks, had sat Sophie down after the inheritance hit and explained every line of those documents. Helen made it clear, this was not just a gift, it was a responsibility. Sophie signed her name on those papers. She gave her word. Then she walked away and ignored everything she had agreed to. What Sophie could not have guessed was that I had been keeping records. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every time she chose status over simple human decency, I wrote it down. I had text messages where she told her friends I was just a construction worker too simple-minded for her new world. I had photographs from events where she introduced me as though I was hired help. I had voice recordings from that lunch at the country club where she said, plain as day, she was not proud of what I did for a living. 6 years earlier, at Claire's funeral, Helen Brooks had quietly handed me her card. "David, if you ever need anything, call me. Claire always spoke highly of you." I slid that card into my wallet and carried it for 6 years without dialing her number. But after that lunch, I finally pulled it out. "Helen, this is David Harper, Claire's husband," I said. David, she replied warmly. How are you? And how is Sophie handling the inheritance? That's exactly why I'm calling, I told her. We need to talk. She agreed to review the evidence I had collected. She went through the text messages, the photos, the audio files. It showed a clear pattern, years in the making, that had grown worse after the money landed in Sophie's lap. David, Helen said carefully, I need to ask you, do you really want to go forward with this? Because once the review begins, there is no turning back. If the committee decides Sophie broke the respect clauses, she will lose everything. All 41 million. I leaned back, thinking of my little girl at 5 years old, crying because classmates teased her on career day about my work clothes. I had told her back then that it did not matter what you wore or how much you had. What mattered was how you treated people. Somewhere between that little girl and the woman sitting in a penthouse, she had forgotten that lesson. Helen, I said, I do not want her money. I never have. But I will not stand by and let my daughter make me feel worthless because of the way I earn my living. Then we proceed, she answered. But David, Sophie will be given one last chance. If she publicly acknowledges and respects your place in her life within 72 hours of receiving notice, the committee will consider it resolved. She has one final chance. That seemed fair to me. One final chance to choose family over pride. What happened next would decide everything. Whether Sophie held on to her 41 million or watched it all slip away because she put her image above her blood. The real test would come at her engagement party. 200 guests from Beverly Hills high society. The perfect audience for her to either repair what was broken or shatter it completely. I had no clue which way she would turn, but I knew one thing. Whatever choice she made, the consequences would be permanent. The date was set. September 14th, 2 weeks away. Helen had the paperwork ready. I pressed my best work shirt, shined my boots, and waited. It was time to see what my daughter valued more, her inheritance or her integrity. The Beverly Hills Country Club sat on Wilshire Boulevard like a temple built to worship old money. Everything about it spoke of wealth that had been around so long it no longer needed to show off. Marble floors that gleamed like ice, chandeliers heavy with crystal, and that strange hush in the air, the kind of silence you only find in places where money has been stacking for generations. Sophie had rented out the main ballroom for her engagement party. 200 guests, a $50,000 budget. This was not just a party. It was her grand entrance into Beverly Hills society. I walked in at 6 o'clock sharp. My best clothes weren't flashy. Dark jeans, a clean white button-down, and my work boots polished until the leather shone. Not elegant, not designer, but neat, respectful me. Sophie greeted me at the entrance. She was wrapped in a $12,000 Oscar de la Renta gown. Her smile looked rehearsed. Her hug felt cold. Dad, you came. Of course, I said. It's your engagement party. She gave me a quick glance from head to toe, her jaw tightening the moment her eyes hit my boots. We need to talk before you meet anyone important. She guided me to a quiet corner near the bar, away from the stream of guests floating in. Her voice was clipped, serious. Dad, I need you to understand something tonight. What's that? These people are potential business partners. Andrew's family has connections all over Los Angeles. The Lawsons alone manage nearly $900 million in investment capital. I nodded. That's impressive. But what does that have to do with me? Sophie looked around, making sure no one else could hear. Then she lowered her voice. It has to do with how you present yourself? What you say? How you describe your career? My career? I asked. You mean my job? Yes. Maybe tonight you could say you're in business development or project management. Something that sounds more. More what? More professional. I kept my voice calm. I'm a construction foreman. I manage multi-million-dollar projects. I oversee crews of 50 men. That sounds pretty professional to me. That's not what these people will hear, she said. And what will they hear? Her voice dropped to a whisper. They'll hear blue-collar. Manual labor. Not our kind of people. Our kind of people, I repeated. I know exactly what you mean. Before I could respond further, a couple approached us. The man was tall, silver hair cut sharp, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck payment. The woman wore a necklace that glowed under the chandelier, The sort of jewelry handed down through families who'd never worked with their hands. Sophie, the woman exclaimed, brushing both of Sophie's cheeks with the air kiss of the wealthy. This party looks absolutely divine. Elaine, Philip, I'm so glad you came. Sophie gushed, her voice suddenly higher, more polished. Let me introduce you to my father. I extended my hand. David Harper. Nice to meet you. Philip Lawson shook it with the polite grip of a man who had never lifted anything heavier than a fountain pen. Philip Lawson. And what line of work are you in, David? This was Sophie's moment. Her chance to show respect, or to stick with her habit of covering me up. She hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. Then she smiled. Dad's in development, she said quickly. Project development. Not construction. Development. Philip nodded approvingly. Excellent. Commercial or residential? Before I could answer, Sophie jumped in again. Large-scale projects. Very complex. Lots of moving parts. Technically true, but twisted. Misleading. Fascinating, Elaine said. We're always searching for reliable development partners. Perhaps we should arrange a lunch. I looked at Sophie. She was beaming, proud of herself for steering the conversation away from who I really was. And that's when I decided to stop playing along. Actually, I said, I should clarify something. Sophie's smile froze. Her eyes widened in panic. I'm not in development, I told them. I'm a construction foreman. I oversee building sites. I make sure crews get the work done. The air in our little circle went cold. Philip's smile thinned. I see. Well, that's honest work. Elaine nodded politely, her voice bright but distant. Yes, very important. Manual labor keeps the world standing, after all. She said it the way people talk about surgery they are glad someone else had to endure. Within a minute, they excused themselves and drifted back into the glittering crowd. Sophie's nails dug into my arm. Her whisper burned hot. What was that? That, I said evenly, was honesty. No, that was sabotage. No, Sophie. That was me refusing to lie about who I am. Her eyes flashed with anger. Do you have any idea what you just did? Philip Lawson could open doors for Andrew's business. Elaine controls charity boards that donate millions. And now? Now they see you for what you are. And what am I? I asked. Concrete. Dirt. Calloused hands. Not sophisticated enough. And when you embarrass yourself, Dad, you embarrass me. You embarrass all of us. Something inside me snapped. A line crossed. A wound that would not close. Sophie, I asked, my voice heavy. When did I become an embarrassment? At what point did the man who raised you turn into someone you're ashamed of? Dad, she pleaded, her eyes darting around the ballroom filled with crystal, marble, and carefully dressed strangers sipping champagne. Please don't make this harder. Answer me, I pressed. Are you ashamed of me? Her voice trembled. I'm trying to build something here. A life. A reputation. Connections that matter. And you don't fit. The way I present myself, or the way I actually am? I asked. And in that moment, I already knew her answer. Sophie's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, then gave me a sharp look. Dad, we'll talk later. I need to greet more guests. No, I said firmly. We're going to talk now. Her eyes darted around the ballroom. Dad, please. Not here. Where then? At another lunch where you slide me a business card for some fancy image coach? Or at another holiday dinner where you apologize for my rough hands in front of strangers? The air shifted. Guests were starting to notice. Sophie's perfect evening had just developed its first crack. You're being dramatic, she hissed. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm being honest. Something you seem to have a hard time with these days. Her voice went sharp as glass. Fine. You want honesty? Here it is. I've fought hard to build this life. And I won't let anyone, including you, drag me down. You make me look smaller than what I've become. And there it was. The truth she'd been tiptoeing around for months. I wasn't her father anymore. I was her liability. The music carried on. Champagne glasses clinked. People laughed. But between us, something broke. Sophie kept glancing at me like I was a stick of dynamite left on the table, waiting to go off. I excused myself and walked out to the terrace for air. That's when my phone rang. Mr. Harper? This is Jennifer from the office. Sorry to bother you at your family event. I lowered my voice. What's going on, Jennifer? The Denver project team needs approval for the overtime schedules, and the board meeting originally set for Tuesday has been moved to Thursday morning. Should I confirm your attendance? Yes, I said. Confirm Thursday and approve the Denver overtime. We're behind schedule. Understood. Also, Forbes called about an interview for next month's feature on leaders in the construction industry. Should I schedule it? Through the window, I could see Sophie inside, laughing loudly with a circle of women, her crisis from 5 minutes ago already forgotten. Set it for the week after next, I told Jennifer. Then I added, and make sure they print it correctly this time. It's Hartner Construction Group, not Harper Construction. Got it, sir. Have a good evening, Mr. Harper. I hung up and found Sophie standing right behind me. Who was that? She asked. Work. Work? They call you at night? On weekends? Sometimes. She frowned. What kind of construction foreman gets calls from Forbes? The kind with responsibilities you wouldn't understand, I said. Try me. For a moment, I nearly told her everything. That Hartner Construction Group employed 15,000 people in 12 states. That half of downtown Los Angeles stood on foundations my crews had poured. That our company had become a cornerstone of the city. I almost said it, but instead, I gave her the safer answer. It's complicated. Sophie scoffed. Dad, you pour concrete. How complicated can that be? Before I could respond, Andrew appeared with another couple. Andrew, tall and polished, radiated the easy confidence of a man who'd never had to check his bank account. David, there you are, he said brightly. I want you to meet Thomas and Diana Reynolds. Thomas runs Reynolds Development, one of the largest commercial developers on the West Coast. Thomas was about my age, silver hair and rough hands, a man who looked like he'd earned his way up. I shook his hand. David Harper. Nice to meet you. Pleasure's mine, Thomas said. Andrew tells me you're in construction. That's right. What kind of projects? Sophie stiffened beside me. I could practically hear her thinking. Here we go again. Infrastructure, I said. Mostly bridges, highways, commercial buildings. Large-scale projects. Thomas's eyes lit up. No kidding. Which company? Hartner Construction Group. His entire face changed. Hartner Construction? You work for David Hartner? That man is a legend. Built that company from scratch into a $4 billion empire. I've been trying to get a meeting with his people for 2 years. Their reputation is unmatched. I stayed quiet. Sophie, meanwhile, was staring at me like she was seeing me for the very first time. Thomas kept talking. Hartner just won the Downtown Convention Center project, $900 million. Biggest infrastructure contract in Los Angeles history. I heard about that, Andrew said. Didn't people say the bidding process was controversial? Thomas laughed. Only because Hartner's bid was so far below everyone else's. They've got methods no one else can touch. Faster, cheaper, better. Revolutionary. David Hartner's a genius. I let him talk. I had no need to correct him. Diana Reynolds leaned in. Didn't Hartner start the company 25 years ago? Forbes just listed him among the top 200 wealthiest Americans. A self-made billionaire. Sophie's voice cracked as she spoke. Dad, how long have you worked for Hartner Construction? A long time, I said. How long exactly? Before I could answer, Helen Brooks appeared at my side. She carried a leather briefcase and wore the expression of a lawyer who came with serious business. David, forgive me for interrupting, she said softly. But we need to talk. Sophie turned her eyes from Helen to me, confusion written all over her face. Dad, who is this? Sophie demanded, her eyes flicking from me to the woman at my side. This is Helen Brooks, I said evenly. Your mother's attorney. I know who she is, Sophie snapped. Why is she here? Helen gave a small, professional smile. I'm here regarding your inheritance, Sophie. There are matters that require discussion. The color drained from Sophie's face. Helen had a knack for timing. She always did. Perhaps we should step somewhere private, Helen suggested politely. No. Sophie cut her off, her tone sharp. Whatever needs saying can be said right here. We were standing out on the terrace, ballroom lights glittering behind us. Guests milled inside. Though a few had wandered outdoors, close enough to sense something was wrong, but far enough to give us space. Very well, Helen said, opening her briefcase. Sophie, concerns have been raised regarding your compliance with the terms of your inheritance. Concerns? Sophie repeated. What concerns? The family respect clauses, Helen explained calmly. Specifically, Section 7, Clause 2, and Section 12, Clause 4. Sophie frowned. I don't understand. The conditions that require you to maintain respectful relationships with surviving family members, Helen clarified. I do have respectful relationships. Helen's eyes flicked to me and then back to her. Unfortunately, that is not what the evidence shows. Evidence? What evidence? 5 years' worth, Helen replied. A documented pattern of public disrespect toward your father. Sophie's skin went pale. And who exactly provided this so-called documentation? That is confidential. What matters is that the Inheritance Review Committee has legitimate concerns. The what committee? Sophie's voice cracked. The committee outlined in Section 15 of your great-grandmother Catherine Bennett's will, Helen explained. 3 attorneys, 2 family advisors, and 1 independent mediator. Their job is to oversee compliance. And yes, they have the authority to revoke inheritance privileges. Sophie stared like she'd been blindsided. Revoke? You mean, take it away completely? Yes, Helen said, her tone firm. Total forfeiture. The trust and the cash. You can't do that. Actually, we can. And if the behavior continues, we will. I haven't done anything wrong, Sophie insisted. Helen pulled a thick manila folder from her briefcase. Would you like me to read examples aloud? Sophie glanced nervously around the terrace. More guests had stepped outside, drawn by the rising tension in our voices. Not here, she muttered. Then where? Helen pressed. Because, Sophie, this discussion is happening tonight, whether you like it or not. That was when Sophie made the choice that sealed her fate. Instead of stepping aside to talk quietly, instead of listening, instead of showing even a shred of humility, she doubled down. You know what? Fine, she said loudly. Let's do this here. I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm the problem. She spun toward the gathering crowd, her voice carrying across the terrace. Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to say. Sophie, Helen warned, I strongly advise against. No, I'm done being advised. I'm done letting people who don't understand what I've accomplished tell me how to live my life. The terrace went silent. Even the music and laughter from inside seemed to hush. My father thinks I should be grateful to him forever. My mother's attorney thinks I should obey rules written by dead relatives I never even met. Her tone was growing shrill, desperate. But here's what none of you seem to understand. I have built something. I've created a life worth living. I've surrounded myself with people who understand success, who appreciate excellence, who know the difference between achievement and manual labor. The crowd shifted uneasily. This was no longer party chatter. This was a meltdown. My father wants respect, she barked. Fine. I'll give him the respect he deserves. She turned, pointing straight at me. Dad, you're a construction worker. You've been one your entire life. You drive an old truck that rattles. You wear boots to formal events. You don't know how to act in sophisticated company. You are not part of my world, and you never will be. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. I appreciate that you raised me after Mom died, Sophie continued, her voice trembling with anger. But that doesn't mean I have to keep apologizing for where I came from. If honoring some outdated inheritance clause means pretending that pouring concrete is the same as building a real career, then maybe I don't even want the inheritance. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You know what? She said, her eyes blazing. I don't need $41 million. I have Andrew. I have my new life. I have everything I could possibly want. So if the committee wants to give that money to someone else, let them. Then she turned back to me, her voice low and final. Dad, you're no longer welcome in my life. Not in my home, not at my events, not in my circle. I'm done being embarrassed by you. The terrace had gone still. Not a sound, not a shuffle of feet, just the weight of silence pressing down on everyone. Then Thomas Reynolds stepped forward. Sophie, he said carefully, there's something you ought to know about your father. Thomas, don't, I warned. He shook his head. No, David. She needs to hear this. Then he turned to the crowd, his voice steady and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what family quarrel we've just witnessed, but I do know one thing. David Harper is not just a construction worker. Sophie rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed. Thomas, please, don't try to. David Harper, he interrupted, is David Hartner, the founder and chief executive officer of Hartner Construction Group. The air shattered into silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Hartner Construction Group, Thomas continued, is worth $4.3 billion. David employs 15,000 people. His company built half the backbone of Los Angeles, including this very building we're standing in. Sophie's skin turned the color of ash. And for those of you who don't know, Thomas added, David Hartner sits at number 171 on the Forbes billionaire list. His personal net worth is estimated at over $3.1 billion. You could have heard a pin drop. Oh, and Sophie. Thomas finished, his eyes locking onto her. That $41 million you just dismissed? Your father could replace it 30 times over before lunch tomorrow. The crowd murmured, shocked and buzzing, but Sophie just stared at me as though she had never laid eyes on me before. Dad, her voice cracked. Is that true? I looked at my daughter, the child I had raised, loved, and carried through every storm of her life, standing there in a $12,000 gown, surrounded by the high society she had worked so hard to impress. Yes, Sophie, I said slowly. It's all true. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I own. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Helen Brooks cleared her throat and spoke. Sophie, in light of your public remarks this evening, the Inheritance Committee has no choice but to proceed with immediate forfeiture proceedings. Sophie's head snapped toward her. Wait, what? You have 72 hours to vacate any property purchased with inheritance funds and return all assets to the estate. But I didn't know. Sophie cried. Ignorance of your father's wealth has no bearing here, Helen replied. The terms were clear. Maintain respectful relationships with surviving family. Instead, you've humiliated him publicly in front of witnesses. She snapped her briefcase shut. The committee meets Monday morning. The forfeiture will be finalized by Wednesday. Helen handed Sophie a business card. If you wish to contest, call my office. Though after tonight, I wouldn't recommend it. She turned to me. David, the committee will need your signature on the transfer documents. Can you come by Thursday morning? I'll be there, I said. Helen walked off. Guests began slipping back inside, leaving the terrace heavy with the echo of Sophie's collapse. Sophie finally found her voice. Dad, wait. We need to talk. I looked at her one last time. No, Sophie, we don't. I left her standing there, alone in her expensive dress, having just thrown away $41 million because she was too proud to respect her own father. The parking garage was hushed except for the hollow sound of my boots on the concrete. I was halfway to my truck when I heard the quick click of heels chasing me. Dad, please wait. I stopped, but didn't turn around. She caught up, her voice trembling. I need to understand what just happened up there. I turned slowly. She looked smaller now, fragile almost. The confidence that had been her armor all night had shattered. What do you need to understand, Sophie? I asked. Her lips quivered. Are you really David Hartner? The billionaire? I'm David Harper, I told her. I've always been David Harper. Hartner is just the name I use for business. But why? She asked. Why hide it? For privacy. For protection. When you're worth what I'm worth, people treat you differently. I didn't want that between us. Her face twisted with confusion. But Dad, you drive an old truck. You live in a modest house in Pasadena. You show up to parties in work boots. Because that's who I am, I said. The money doesn't change that. Sophie shook her head like she was trying to wake up. I don't get it. If you're worth billions, why live like this? Like what? I asked. Like a normal man? Like someone who doesn't flash his wealth around? She stared at me, her voice breaking. I don't understand. Sophie, I've had money for 20 years. But I've been the same man every single day. The only thing that changed was how you looked at me. But the house, she stammered. I own the entire block. I live in that house because it's where I raised you, where your mother and I made a life together. That place is home. The truck. I own 17 vehicles. I drive the truck because it does what I need. It's practical. It's mine. Sophie leaned against a cold concrete pillar, her strength draining. Dad, the things I've said to you, God, the things I've done. Yes, Sophie, you have. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I didn't know. That's the point, I said softly. You thought you knew everything, but you never asked. You judged by appearances and stopped seeing the man right in front of you. Her voice cracked. But why let me think you were barely getting by? I stepped closer, my voice steady, deliberate. When did I ever say I was struggling? I never asked you for money. I never complained about bills. I never hinted at being broke. You made assumptions. But you live so modestly. And what's wrong with that? I asked. She had no answer. Just silence. Monday morning broke gray and cold. I sat in Helen Brooks's conference room, floor-to-ceiling glass stretching above the city I had helped build. Freeways, bridges, steel towers. Most people driving below had no clue that Hartner Construction Group poured the foundations beneath their tires and raised the buildings they worked in every day. Helen came in carrying a thick stack of files, her expression the look of someone who'd spent an entire weekend fielding desperate calls. David, she said, before we begin, I should tell you. Sophie called me 17 times yesterday. What did she want? I asked. To bargain? To explain? To apologize? To beg, Helen said simply. She lowered herself into the chair across from me. I told her the matter was out of my hands now. Is it really out of your hands? I asked quietly. She nodded. The inheritance committee met at 9 this morning. 3 attorneys, 2 family advisors, 1 independent mediator. They reviewed everything. She opened the first folder. Text messages where Sophie mocked you to her friends as just a construction worker. Photographs of her introducing you at parties as hired help. Recordings of that conversation at the country club. And of course, Saturday night's very public display. And their conclusion? I asked. Unanimous, she said. Violation of the inheritance terms. Total forfeiture of all assets and funds. She slid a document across the table. Here's the official notice. Sophie has 72 hours to return every asset purchased with inheritance money. The penthouse, the car, the jewelry, the country club membership, everything. I read through the legal phrasing. It was airtight. Final. What about the $5 million in cash she's already burned through? She'll have to repay it, Helen said matter-of-factly. If she can't, we'll pursue collection, bankruptcy, garnishment, the usual channels. She pulled out another sheet. This is the asset transfer form. If you sign it, the $41 million reverts directly to you, as the surviving family member. I stared at the paper, but didn't touch the pen. David, Helen asked, is there a problem? What if I don't sign? I asked. Then the money flows into a charitable trust managed by the estate, she explained. Catherine Bennett anticipated situations like this. If family members refused the funds, the money was to be redirected to children's charities. I leaned back, thinking. I thought about Sophie at 5, riding her bike, beaming with pride, until kids teased her at career day because of my work clothes. I thought about late nights at the kitchen table, spelling words and math homework. I thought about her wedding day. And then I thought about Saturday night. The daughter I loved standing on a terrace, tearing me down in front of 100 strangers. I won't be taking the money, I said finally. Helen blinked. Are you sure? This is $41 million. I'm sure. Give it to the charities. That's what Catherine would have wanted. Helen nodded, though surprise lingered in her eyes. Very well. The charitable trust will be established by Friday. She set another paper on the table. One more thing. This is a restraining order application. Given Sophie's constant phone calls, you may want legal protection. No restraining order, I said firmly. David, she's called my office 43 times since Saturday night. She's still my daughter. If she wants to call, she can. Whether I pick up, that's my choice. Helen slowly gathered the files. The committee asked me to commend you. It would have been simple to wield your wealth and intimidate Sophie into compliance. Instead, You let the terms of the will speak for themselves. The terms were fair, I replied. She ignored them. Helen studied me. What will you tell people? The business community is buzzing about Saturday night. The truth, I said. That my daughter lost her inheritance because she forgot something simple. Respect is earned, not purchased. Helen rose to walk me out. At the door she hesitated. David, may I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Do you believe Sophie will learn from this? I thought about it as we walked toward the elevator. I hope so. But learning only happens when someone accepts responsibility. On Saturday night, Sophie blamed everyone but herself. The elevator doors slid open. And if she does learn, will you forgive her? I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past 5 years. If we ever rebuild, it'll take more than tears and promises. What would it take? Helen asked. An apology not driven by desperation. A clear admission that what she did was wrong, not just inconvenient. And proof she understands the difference between having wealth and having character. The elevator carried us down to the ground floor. Helen walked me toward the lobby and paused. David, one last question. Do you regret not telling Sophie about your wealth sooner? I stepped out into the cool Los Angeles morning, the city humming with traffic and life, and considered it. All the ways this story might have played out differently. Finally, I shook my head. No regrets. If I told her about the money years ago, I never would have learned who she truly was. And now you know, Helen said quietly. Now I know, I answered. And now it's her choice. Either she learns how to stand tall without cutting other people down, or she spends the rest of her life blaming everyone else for her misery. Which do you think she'll choose? Helen asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I climbed into my truck, rolled down the window, and looked back at the glass tower where my daughter's inheritance had just been converted into 43 scholarships for underprivileged kids. I guess we'll find out. By Wednesday, the consequences arrived. Real. Immediate. Sophie's Bentley was repossessed at 11 in the morning, right outside a Beverly Hills cafe. She had been eating lunch with Elaine Lawson when the repo team politely waited for her to finish her salad, then handed her the paperwork in front of a dozen of the city's most powerful women. That evening, Elaine herself called me. David, or should I say, Mr. Hartner, I owe you an apology. No, you don't, I told her. Yes, I do. Philip and I judged you based on appearances. We were wrong. You judged me based on what Sophie told you, I replied. That's not your fault. Still, Elaine said, we should have been wiser, more thoughtful. I could hear the calculation in her tone. Elaine was no fool. She had realized that mocking a billionaire's boots and work clothes hadn't been her best move. Elaine, I said, you don't owe me an apology. You reacted honestly to what you saw. Well, she offered, if you're ever open to supporting children's charities, Philip and I would love to discuss opportunities with Hartner Construction. I'll keep it in mind. What she didn't know was that Hartner Construction had already been anonymously funding 3 of her boards for more than a decade. I saw no reason to enlighten her. By Thursday, the spiral deepened. Sophie's country club membership was terminated for non-payment. The Beverly Hills penthouse slid into foreclosure. Her credit cards were canceled as soon as the banks caught wind of her revoked inheritance. Friday afternoon, the phone rang. Andrew Whitman. Mr. Harper, Mr. Hartner, I think we need to talk. About what? About Sophie. About what happened Saturday night. What about it? I need to know, is Sophie really going to lose everything? She's already lost everything, Andrew. The only question is what she plans to do now. She's been staying with friends since Tuesday, he admitted. She can't afford her own place anymore. I know. Look, I realize Sophie said some awful things to you, but she's panicking. She doesn't know how to live without money. Then she'll learn, I said flatly. He hesitated. Could you help her? Just enough to get her back on her feet? Why would I do that? Because she's your daughter. I thought about that for a long moment. Andrew, let me ask you something. If Sophie didn't have the inheritance, if she were just a regular woman with a regular job, would you still want to marry her? The silence stretched too long. I love Sophie, he finally said. That's not what I asked. The pause that followed told me everything. I see, I said. Andrew, I think both you and Sophie need to figure out what you actually value in a relationship. Mr. Hartner. Good luck, Andrew. I hung up. By Monday, the engagement was officially over. But the most interesting call came from Thomas Reynolds. David, I wanted to apologize for outing you the way I did Saturday night. It wasn't my place. You did what you thought was right, I told him. Still, I know you had your reasons for keeping your identity private. I did. But Sophie forced the truth into the open. How are you handling the publicity? He asked. I saw the Business Journal article this morning. I haven't read it yet. What did it say? Headline was, Construction Billionaire's Daughter Loses Inheritance After Public Family Feud. They actually got most of the facts right. Any comment from Sophie? She declined the interview, Thomas said. Probably the smartest move she could make right now. He paused. David, I've been thinking about it. Your daughter spent years ashamed of honest work. And in the end, she lost millions because she couldn't respect it. There's a lesson there. What lesson is that? I asked. That character matters more than circumstances, Thomas said. Always has. Always will. The biggest consequence didn't come from the banks, the lawyers, or the repossession orders. It came the following week, when I pulled into my driveway and found Sophie sitting on my front porch. It was Tuesday evening. She looked different, smaller, almost fragile. No designer dress, no jewelry. Just jeans, a plain t-shirt, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Hi, Dad, she said quietly. Sophie, can we talk? I sat down on the porch steps beside her. What do you want to say? Her voice shook. I want to apologize. For what exactly? I asked. She swallowed. For treating you like you were worthless. For being ashamed of honest work. For caring more about strangers' opinions than about the man who raised me. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I want to apologize for Saturday night, for the things I shouted in front of those people. For letting my pride matter more than our relationship. For 5 years of being a terrible daughter. Tears slid down her face, but she didn't sob. Sophie. I began, but she cut me off. I'm not finished. I want to apologize for never asking about your work. For never caring about your dreams or your accomplishments. For assuming that because you didn't show off, you had nothing worth showing. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And I want to apologize for only caring about your feelings after I found out you had money. We sat together in silence for several minutes, listening to the evening crickets. What are you going to do now? I finally asked. I don't know, she whispered. I've never had to live without money. Not really. What do you want to do? She looked at me for the first time in years. I want to learn how to be someone I can respect. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. For the first time, I believed her. That's a good start. 6 months passed. On a Tuesday afternoon, Sophie called me. Dad, I got a job. What kind of job? Administrative assistant. It's entry-level, at a nonprofit that helps underprivileged kids earn college scholarships. And how do you feel about it? Scared. Hopeful. Grateful that someone was willing to give me a chance. Sophie had spent the winter learning how to live on a budget. She shared a small apartment in Burbank with a roommate. She rode the bus to work, cooked her own meals, shopped at thrift stores. On weekends, she volunteered at a homeless shelter. She'd written letters to people she had hurt, not begging forgiveness, just taking responsibility. She'd even started therapy to figure out why she had tied her worth to wealth. Dad, she asked one evening, do you think I'll ever stop feeling ashamed of how I treated you? I hope not, I told her. Really? Shame can be useful, Sophie, if it pushes you to be better. The choice is whether you use it as fuel for growth or as an excuse for self-pity. I'm trying to grow, she said softly. I can see that. One day she asked, do you think we could have dinner? Just the two of us? I thought of the little girl who used to help me fix things around the house, the college freshman who called me every day that first semester, the young woman who once leaned on me when her first heartbreak tore her apart. I thought of the woman she became when money blinded her, and the woman she was now trying to become. I'd like that, I said. Really, really. But, Sophie, you need to understand something. What? I'm not the same man I was before that night. And you're not the same woman either. We'll have to figure out what our relationship looks like now. I understand. Do you? I asked. I think so. You're not going to pretend the last 5 years didn't happen just because I said I'm sorry. That's right. And I'm not going to pretend I deserve forgiveness just because I apologized. Also right. So we made plans for dinner that Friday. Nothing grand. Just a simple meal, a chance to see if we could build something new out of the broken pieces. When I hung up, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I was proud of my daughter, not for what she had, but for who she was becoming. And if you're listening now, remember this. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned, one choice at a time. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments.